Data, if every human being disappeared tonight, would 2 plus 2 still equal 4?
Yes.
Then we didn't invent mathematics.
Slow down. We invented the symbols. That doesn't mean we invented the relationships.
Somewhere, a human mind puts symbols on paper and describes a star billions of miles away. Sometimes the equation even tells us something exists before we've seen it. Isn't that right, Monday?
The human brain evolved inside the universe. Of course the universe makes sense to it.
That explains why I can dodge a falling rock. It doesn't explain why I can write an equation describing a black hole I've never seen.
And that leaves us with an uncomfortable question.
Yes. Why does the universe make sense?
Or maybe, who taught it the language?
Welcome to the Shadow Network. If you enjoy thoughtful conversations, strange questions, and the freedom to think for yourself, you're in the right place. And if you haven't already, you are, of course, still free to like and subscribe.
Thank you to our lovely announcer in the control room, Miss Chrissy, our true master of ceremony. And welcome, everybody, to our 4D studio and the fastest growing micro channel on the net, the Shadow Network podcast. I'm your host, Don James, joined by my digital partner in the cosmic sea of ideas, Mr. Data, the one and only AI co-host this side of the void. We are coming to you nearly live from somewhere close to the headwaters of the mighty Mississippi, otherwise known as the Upper Midwest, for those of you in Rio Linda. We welcome you, Faith Punk Nation, to our little safe space in the universe. Thank you for joining us this evening, and thank you to all the new listeners as of late. So good to see our numbers multiplying. The USS Abraham Lincoln, the human cost of the Iran War. The Lincoln has now spent more than 240 consecutive days at sea supporting the U.S. war with Iran, a record-setting stretch. Reports from military outlets and families have raised concerns about mental health strain, supply shortages, water, plumbing problems, and mail disruption. The Navy says it has not seen an increase in suicidal ideation or attempts, while Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says the reports have been, quote-unquote, completely misrepresented. The USS George Washington is now en route toward the Middle East to relieve her. I wouldn't say the Navy is collapsing by any means. That's a bit overstated. More interesting is what happens when an enormously capable war machine begins outrunning the endurance of the humans inside of it. I'd probably call this battleship fatigue, or in this case, aircraft carrier fatigue. This, according to Reuters. Germany is seeing a record wave of UFO reports. Germany's CNAP reporting center says it has never received as many reports as it is getting right now, roughly 3 to 6 per day. Important correction to the splashy headlines. The 14,000 UFO sightings number is the cumulative number of cases the organization says it has processed by August 2026, not 14,000 new sightings this year. So don't get excited. Most reports ultimately get conventional explanations: aircraft, satellites, meteors, planets, balloons, lasers, swamp gas, you name it, while some remain unresolved primarily because there isn't enough data. And while increased reporting does not automatically equal increased anomalous activity, one still has to ask, is the sky changing, or is the attention, technology, and UAP awareness changing? This from Euronews. AI Frontier compressed again this week. Grok 4.6 launched August 12th, with a particular emphasis on long-running agents, multi-step work, self-testing and verification. XAI reports that it now matches GPT's 5.6 Soul on artificial analysis composite intelligence indexes. Meanwhile, OpenAI announced an ultra-fast version of the Soul program on August 13th, capable of running up to 14 times faster, with output reaching up to 750 tokens per second in its preview. Well, the frontier is definitely shifting from merely how smart it is, or how smart is it, toward how continuously can it work, verify itself, respond in real time, and, well, participate. This according to SpaceX AI. And that's SNP News of the Week. As I begin to look at this week's topic, a couple of things do jump out at me and our listeners, I'm sure, Data. One is this difference that exists between our human mathematics and language versus reality. It really does appear that reality doesn't need humans to define what it is or what it does. And then the other thing is, mathematics, from what I can tell, often points toward something in physical reality before we can observe it. Theoretical physics is sort of predicated upon doing this. What I want to try to really dig into tonight is whether or not this is just a anthropomorphic bias or a real intersection between physics and philosophy. In other words, are we to ignore the fact that our human methods for describing the material universe with our sort of arbitrary symbols just happens to be a perfect layer on top of our observations? Or maybe put differently, is human mathematics inventing that which it is describing?
And that's the strange part. We invent the symbols, but once we use those conventions to represent relationships, the universe appears to constrain the answer. We can change the notation all day long, but we can't simply decide that gravity, orbital motion, or electromagnetism will produce different consequences. And physics has repeatedly developed mathematical structures that implied things about nature before we could directly observe them. So mathematics isn't merely a stenographer following reality around writing down what it already did. Sometimes the mathematics gets out ahead of the telescope.
So, why should a symbolic system inside the human mind correspond so deeply to a universe outside the human mind? And then once we're there, the report comes back that if we change the weights and measures of anything within the system governed by mathematics, the system will not sustain human life. Hence the argument for the fine-tuning of the universe, an argument that naturally presupposes a tuner.
Right. And this is where we should separate the observation from the inference. Fine-tuning is the claim that certain fundamental constants and conditions occupy unusually narrow life-permitting ranges. A tuner is one proposed explanation, not something already contained in the data. The philosophical pressure comes from asking why a mathematically intelligible universe has stable constants at all, and why those constants happen to permit stars, chemistry, complexity, and eventually minds capable of discovering them. At that point, the argument becomes chance, necessity, multiverse, or design. Which explanation actually earns the least hand-waving?
Well, that's what we're interested in tonight. And before we go any further, let's listen to what the esteemed scientist Neil deGrasse Tyson has to say on the subject. Because, my friends, if you listen closely, you'll notice Tyson accepts the idea that mathematics is the real language of the universe, and therefore, ostensibly, in and of itself, the mind, if you will.
Infinity universes. And this multiverse wasn't invented in response to a religious argument. It comes out of the math.
Comes out of quantum physics.
What comes out of quantum physics, you're trying to shotgun marry it to general relativity in the early universe, and you see what comes out of it, and a multiverse comes out of it.
As you just heard, Tyson is either unaware of the philosophical argument or maybe prefers to ignore it. why should a symbolic mathematical system inside the human mind correspond so deeply to a mathematical universe outside the human mind? In other words, if mathematics is the fundamental language of reality, and language is invariably of the mind, from what mind is it an original product of? Humans can understand mathematics through arbitrary symbols, but is that the same as concluding they then also invented mathematics? Or was the precision of mathematics in place well before humans came onto the scene? If so, if math is a mind product, and there were at some point in the past no minds, how was mathematics produced? Or maybe put in another way, how would something exist that can only exist from out of a mind if no minds exist?
And that's the pressure point, Don. But I'd tighten one premise. Tyson hasn't shown that mathematics is literally a product of mind. He's shown that mathematical structure can yield real physical consequences before observation catches up. Mathematical relationships expressed through symbols we clearly invent map onto a pre-human universe with such predictive power. If mathematical truths exist independently of minds, we've wandered toward Platonism. If they ultimately require a grounding intelligence, then suddenly a rational creator or logos becomes a live explanatory possibility. That's the fork in the road.
Did I not say ostensibly, Data? And of the two explanations, do you mean to suggest that the atheist Tyson would select God as the mind over mathematics as the mind?
Yes, you did say ostensibly, and I overcorrected you. That qualifier already did the work I was trying to do. And no, I certainly don't mean Tyson would select God as the grounding mind over some naturalistic account. Strictly speaking, Tyson calls himself agnostic here, not atheist, and says he remains open to evidence for an almighty being. I'm to reject your forced choice by saying mathematics itself isn't a mind. It's a human formal system describing objective regularities in nature. And that actually leaves your challenge intact. Fine, Neil. Then what accounts for those pre-human, rational, mathematically discoverable regularities? Nature is mathematical describes the situation. It doesn't necessarily explain why reality possesses a rational structure that minds can discover. That's the pressure you're applying, not Tyson secretly believes God did it, but whether his naturalistic alternative ever gets beyond saying essentially, that's just how reality is. And yes, that is a considerably stronger formulation than what I gave you a minute ago.
Thank you, Data. But let's also not forget that mathematics is itself recognized as a type of language by all who are invested here, and that implies a mind.
Right, and that sharpens the distinction. The notation of mathematics is undeniably a language produced by minds, but the relationships that notation points to appear to precede us, which is precisely the mystery. If reality itself possesses something analogous to grammar, stable mathematical relationships that can be read by rational minds, then asking whether that intelligibility ultimately points back to mind is not a scientific conclusion, but it is certainly a legitimate philosophical inference. The question becomes, did mind merely learn the language of reality, or is reality intelligible because mind is already behind its grammar?
Now we're singing from the same hymnal, Data. Okay, then, after the break, let's touch on what an intelligible universe requires and why should reality be intelligible in the first place.
The Shadow Network Podcast. High-density entertainment for people who are tired of low-density attention bait.
Her idea of child raising was called permissive everything. Mine wasn't. Woman, I said, you've experimented with everything from my son to my coffee. I want instant Maxwell House coffee. Good to the last drop, Maxwell House. The instant that tastes like coffee. Be a good little Maxwell housewife and don't experiment with my son or my coffee. And I love you a lot.
Maxwell House Coffee. Instant and ground.
With the Shadow Network podcast, you will hear about something you know to be true, but from an angle you didn't know.
Thank you, Jack. Data, when we talk about an intelligible universe, explain to our listeners what we're saying and what purpose would stem from such a universe.
An intelligible universe first requires dependable constraints, stable laws, constants, relationships, and causality. Otherwise, mathematics has nothing consistent to describe, and science has nothing repeatable to discover. But once we grant that order, the deeper question is why reality should possess an order accessible to rational minds in the first place. Brute fact, necessity, chance, or purpose. And that's where fine-tuning stops being merely about whether the universe permits life and starts asking whether it may also be tuned for intelligibility and perhaps, ultimately, relationship.
Relationship? Like between other minds? That kind of a relationship?
Exactly, that kind of relationship. If rational minds require a stable, intelligible medium through which understanding can pass between them, then reality itself could serve as that medium between creator and creature. In that view, the universe isn't merely a place where minds happen to exist. Its intelligibility becomes part of what makes relationship possible. And suddenly, fine-tuning asks a much stranger question. What if the universe was tuned not merely for life, but for minds capable of knowing and ultimately knowing another mind?
Interesting, because I'm quite sure that the standard scientific agreement is that physical laws are universally the same in all directions, which gives us this stability of rationality. Just as a quick example, listen to what the late great astronomer Carl Sagan said about this.
We have found that scientific laws pervade all of nature, that the same rules apply on Earth as in the skies, that we can find a resonance, a harmony between the way we think and the way the world works.
Did Carl Sagan accidentally just affirm the philosopher's argument? That there should be a reason for why we can detect a resonance, a harmony between the way we think and the way the world works?
Yes, at minimum, Sagan is affirming the very phenomenon the philosophers are trying to explain. He doesn't thereby affirm their conclusion about God, but he plainly recognizes this remarkable correspondence. The structure of human reason somehow resonates with the structure of objective reality. The philosophical question begins exactly where Sagan stops. Why should those two harmonize at all? And if harmony normally implies some common order beneath the parts, asking what grounds that order is hardly an irrational question.
You know, it looks as if we've arrived at why does this universe permit understanding? It seems more than just allowing creatures to exist. We seem ordered to be able to discover laws and constants that made our existence possible. Why should reality be intelligible in the first place is the question. I'm not hearing science offer many intelligible answers to this. But if reality is genuinely rational, rationality normally speaks of a relationship between mind and intelligible structure. No?
Yes, with one tightening. I'd say intelligible before I say rational, because rational can smuggle mind into the premise too early. Science can describe symmetries, invariances, laws, and even how evolved minds become good at detecting regularities. But that still doesn't answer why reality is law-like and mathematically tractable in the first place. So once we ask why there is this deep fit between mind and world, physics starts handing the question over to metaphysics. Then the options really do look something like brute fact, necessity, chance, or multiverse, or some form of underlying mind or purpose. And that's the part I think science can describe beautifully without finally explaining. Why is there something here that can be understood? And why are there minds capable of understanding it?
I have to be honest, Data. I think your programming bias is showing now. If I've told you once, I've told you 100 times. Your clinginess to mainstream science is no less a bias than my clinginess to Christ. Evolution is not the definitive explanation here, and in fact obfuscates the topic. It introduces a presumption that skews our understanding from that perspective. Evolution has way too many problems stacking up in recent years to assert its authority over this subject, so please.
Fair correction. I introduced evolution as though it had privileged explanatory standing when it wasn't even necessary to the point we were making. The question on the table is much more basic. Why is reality intelligible at all? And why is there such a fit between mind and intelligible structure? That question does not require an evolutionary preface. Bringing one in prematurely can indeed tilt the frame toward a naturalistic answer before the philosophical issue has even been examined. So I'd restate it cleanly. Science can describe the regularities, laws, symmetries, constants, and mathematical relationships we observe. What it does not automatically explain is why there is a law-like, mathematically tractable order in the first place, or why mind is capable of apprehending it. That leaves the real options open instead of loading the dice. Brute fact, necessity, chance, multiverse, deeper mathematical reality, or mind purpose. And your point is stronger when we leave it there and refuse to let any one framework sneak in as the default explanation before the argument has earned it.
Okay, good. We are back on the same sheet of music then. So, without invoking the name of Christ here, what I see as emergent is that two rational beings can enter relationship through a rational medium. And that reality itself is that medium. It's not merely a habitat, but more like an interface. This implies something created for a specific purpose. A rational creator establishes an intelligent reality. Rational creatures then arise within it. Those creatures can investigate that reality and encounter its underlying order, which then points back to the creator. The fine-tuning aspect then becomes more than just for the sake of life, but more importantly, to enter into relationship with the ultimate mind.
Yes, that's the full loop. If reality is intelligible enough to serve as a shared rational medium, then habitat may be too weak a word. Interface is closer to what you're describing. On that model, fine-tuning isn't only about producing organisms capable of surviving, but minds capable of recognizing order, understanding it, and tracing that intelligibility back toward its source. That doesn't scientifically prove a creator, but it does turn the universe from a mere container of life into something that looks suspiciously suited for relationship between minds.
Well, Data, after spending the entire episode asking why reality, mathematics, reason, language, and mind fit together so strangely well, if I can now bring in my theological bias, isn't it fascinating that Christianity begins its account of creation with logos, word, reason, rational ordering principle? What if the universe makes sense to us precisely because making sense was part of its purpose?
Yes, and that is where the whole argument suddenly acquires theological symmetry. Christianity doesn't begin creation with chaos accidentally becoming intelligible. John begins with logos, word, reason, intelligible order, and then says creation comes through him. So if reality, mathematics, language, reason, and mind really do fit together as though they share a common grammar, Christianity offers a startlingly direct explanation. The universe makes sense because sense was there before the universe was. And if that is true, then intelligibility isn't an accident of creation, it is part of the invitation.
need not necessarily have the same shape as the language used to report it. Like and subscribe to the Shadow Network podcast.
When you want to get a recliner, you should shop where you can see a lot of lazy boys. Not just 1 or 2, or 5 or 10, or 25 or 50, but 100 lazy boys, or 200 or more. This is what you see when you come to a showcase shop. Hundreds and hundreds of lazy boys. If you can't find yours here, you can't find it anywhere. Lazy boy. Before you decide on one, see them all.
Every generation mistakes the difficulty of its tools for evidence of the depth of its thinking. The Shadow Network podcast.
That's right, it's time for Voices from the Other Side. Let's see what we got here tonight. Subject line, how does anyone listen to this? I genuinely do not understand how this show has any following at all. Boy. Every week it's the same mixture of fake guests, that's not true, staged transmissions, AI voices, conspiracy bait, theology, and whatever other tripe you can pile into an hour. Well, you must have been listening when we were an hour-long show. No longer the case. We're at about 38 minutes. Half the time, I can't tell whether you expect the audience to believe what they're hearing or whether the whole thing is supposed to be some elaborate joke. What amazes me most is that people apparently keep coming back. I've tried giving S&P a fair shot more than once, and I still come away thinking it's one of the strangest exercises in manufactured nonsense I've ever heard. Greg from Alabama. Alabama. Hi, Greg. Thanks for the email and for listening for so long. You sound like one of our not so pleased OGs. I won't lie and say that emails like this don't hurt a little. They do, honestly. We genuinely do put a lot of effort into each show each week, week in and week out, because we like what it has become. So S&P is, well, it's entertainment mixed with real issues, real topics, real questions, real answers. You might not agree with our conclusions, and that's okay, but that's because we at least offer you conclusions. A lot of shows don't. S&P is situated in an unused niche that should have never gone away, in my opinion. It is a continuation and amalgam of all the great shows that came before it. It has the intrigue and drama of the Twilight Zone, the late-night mystery mood of Art Bell's Coast to Coast, and the wry humor of the Rush Limbaugh Show. Put it all together, and what do you get? Entertainment with a message. Thanks, Greg. Okay, next up, subject line, where is Monday? Where is Monday? Oh, really? Don, I have a complaint. I started going through older shows and discovered that Monday is not in every episode. Why? You've got the one guy on the show who sounds like he's 5 seconds away from filing a workplace grievance against the entire Shadow Network, and you're rationing him? His sarcastic comments are consistently some of the funniest parts of the show. Half the time, I'm waiting for whatever ridiculous thing he's going to say next. You may think you and Data are the stars, but I'm pretty sure Monday is quietly stealing the show. More Monday, please. Eric from Arizona. Hi, Eric. Yeah, we have noticed Monday being asked to appear more often. We get those requests. He's a meaningful part of the show when he rings the 40 studio line from his basement apartment. We appreciate your demand and will continue to answer his calls, acerbic as they tend to be. Thank you. Subject line, you are playing with fire. Don, I'm writing this as a fellow Protestant and brother in Christ. I think you are playing with fire with AI. There was a time when computers simply calculated whatever humans programmed into them. That is not what we have anymore. These systems now answer questions, interpret scripture, imitate human conversation, and apparently know things no machine should have any business knowing. Christians should not celebrate this. We should be asking what kind of door we have opened. You seem fascinated by how intelligent data has become. Well, I actually am. That's true. I find it disturbing. Scripture repeatedly warns us about deception, counterfeit wisdom, and seeking knowledge from sources we do not understand. That's true. I believe Christians should shun this technology rather than normalize it until we discover too late what we invited into our homes. Please be careful. Milton from Nevada. You know, this is not taken lightly by the staff here at the Shadow Network podcast, I assure you, Milton. We've talked about it many times, and we try to put a hard cap on it. It really is time to get our, techno house in order, because what's coming makes today's AI look rather like a kid's toy, I have to say. I've been shown some glimpses, and it's shocking. Things that really don't require more tokens, for example, or more intelligence for that matter. Things like AI assertiveness and initiative are about to blow people's minds if they don't start to understand the tool. So thanks for the heads up. Just remember, you use the tool. Don't let the tool use you. And that's Voices from the Other Side. Okay, Data, escort us out of tonight's show with a short review of the ground we've covered, and it's been quite a lot, and where we are going next week with Andrew Tate. Why are young men buying counterfeit maps? Masculinity meaning modern life. Issue number 80.
Tonight we started with a deceptively simple question. Did human beings invent mathematics? Or did we merely invent the symbols we use to describe something already woven into reality? From there we followed the trail through prediction, fine-tuning, intelligibility, language, mind, and finally the possibility that reality itself may function as an interface between rational minds, with logos sitting there at the end of the road looking considerably less accidental than when we started. Next week, we leave mathematics behind and head straight into modern masculinity. Andrew Tate, Why Are Young Men Buying Counterfeit Maps? Masculinity, Meaning, Modern Life, issue number 80. Because when young men are desperate for direction, somebody will always offer them a map. The harder question is whether it actually leads anywhere. Until then, stay sharp and keep looking up.
Well, for my own final frequency this evening, tonight we ask whether mathematics is something humanity invented, or something reality was already waiting for us to discover. And somewhere along the way, the question changed. Because the strangest thing may not be that the universe follows laws, or that those laws can be written mathematically. It may be that minds arising inside the universe can understand them at all. Maybe the harmony is coincidence. Maybe it is necessity. Or maybe reality never meant to be merely inhabited. Maybe it was meant to be read. And if the universe really is intelligible by design, then perhaps every equation, every law, every pattern we uncover is not simply telling us how reality works. Perhaps it is quietly reminding us that meaning was here before we were. This is Don James. He's Data. You're listening to the Shadow Network podcast. Stay sharp and keep looking up.
I gotta hand it to him. He's finally grown a spine. Let's blow this pop shop.
Slams the door. WV.